The next parable that we want to consider is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus found in Luke 16:19 through 31. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us is a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." He said, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent." He said to them, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." There are several things to note about this parable. It follows the previous parable and Jesus' statement in 16:13, "You cannot serve God and wealth." Luke also lets the reader know that this is part of a conflict with some Pharisees who were ridiculing Jesus, and Luke notes in 16:14 that they loved wealth. There are a lot of interesting details in this story that are really beyond the scope of our topic. What we want to note is that the rich man is judged for essentially ignoring Lazarus. The rich man had a responsibility to help Lazarus in some way. That is clearly why he is being judged. One question we want to ask is, what is the extent of that obligation? We have already seen that Jesus had a somewhat carefree attitude toward wealth, and that he is not opposed to using some of that wealth for celebration. We noted that Jesus repeatedly went to banquets and was accused of being a partier. So to what extent does a person have an obligation to the poor? We also note Jesus' statement about the poor you will have always. John Snyder, in his book, The Good of Affluence, suggests that we use the concept of moral proximity. By this, Snyder suggests that we are more responsible to those who are in our moral sphere of influence. As Snyder points out, what makes the behavior of this rich man in this parable so problematic is that he had wealth, is not that he had wealth or that he enjoyed it. Rather, that was his spiritual obliviousness to the tremendous human suffering that was very near to him. Lazarus is not simply the generic poor, but a human being who had serious need, who was directly in front of him. In the parable, the rich man even knows the beggar by name. His name is Lazarus. Lazarus is a Jewish name, a member of the same people group lying at his doorstep. In a modern age, where we can be aware of poverty on the other side of the world through television or the internet, are there limits to our obligations? If it is acceptable to use some of our wealth on ourselves, then there must be some limits to our responsibility. On the other hand, you have something like the parable of the Good Samaritan, where the Samaritan took care of a total stranger. Yet, still on the other hand, you have the statement of Jesus that the poor will be with you always. So there must be a necessary balance on how we treat the poor and how we use our wealth. Many Christians have attempted to draw firm lines on this topic, but most Christian writers acknowledge that each situation requires a thoughtful response. We clearly have a greater responsibility to our own family members than to total strangers. We also have a greater responsibility to those who have closer physical proximity to us than those who are far away. This concept of varying degrees of responsibility can also be seen in Paul's comment in Galatians 6:10. So then, whenever we have opportunity, let us work for the good of all, and especially for those of the family of faith. So clearly, we are called to be generous with our resources, and when dire needs confront us, we need to respond in the best way that we can. At the same time, there have to be some sort of limits on what we can use our resources for. We will discuss those questions in later sessions.